Pay attention to this footage captured by a local fisherman on his cell phone from the shoreline of Cape Fear, North Carolina. Watch closely as this massive shape breaches the surface just a few hundred yards from shore. See how the water churns white around it? That distinctive dorsal fin towering over the waves? The size of this creature is almost incomprehensible when you compare it to the lighthouse pier in the foreground. This single piece of footage would become the turning point in one of the most terrifying maritime investigations in American history, because what you're looking at isn't just a shark. It's a calculated killer responsible for the deaths of over 200 people. And what investigators discovered inside its stomach would make even seasoned detectives lose sleep. You know that feeling when you're on vacation and everything just feels perfect? The sun on your face, the smell of salt water, not a care in the world? For the Rodriguez family from Atlanta, Georgia, that feeling was exactly what they were chasing when they booked their dream fishing charter off the coast of North Carolina in early September 2014. Miguel Rodriguez had been planning this trip for 2 years. He'd saved up, researched the best charter companies, even bought matching fishing gear for him and his 2 teenage sons, Daniel and Marcus. His wife Sofia wasn't much for fishing, but she loved being on the water. "It's peaceful," she'd tell her friends. "No phones, no emails, just us and the ocean." Cape Fear had always been a fishing paradise. The continental shelf drops off sharply there, bringing deep water surprisingly close to shore. That meant big game fish, marlin, tuna, sharks too, but the good kind, the ones that made for exciting catches and even better stories back home. The Rodriguez family chartered a 32-foot vessel called the Morning Star with Captain Tim Brennan, a weathered fisherman who'd been working these waters for over 20 years. Tim knew every current, every reef, every spot where the big ones like to hide. He'd never lost a client, never even had a serious injury on his boat. September 7th dawned clear and calm. Perfect conditions. The Rodriguez family met Captain Brennan at the marina at 6 a.m., all of them buzzing with excitement. Sofia snapped a photo of Miguel and the boys with their arms around each other, the Morning Star in the background. She posted it to Facebook with the caption, "Boys' Day on the Water. Wish us luck." That would be the last photo anyone would see of them alive. The Morning Star was supposed to return to dock by 4 p.m. When 5 o'clock rolled around and there was no sign of them, the marina manager, Pete Dawson, started making calls. Straight to voicemail. Every single time. By 6 p.m., he contacted the Coast Guard. Now here's the thing about missing boats. It happens more than you'd think. Engine trouble, radio failure, even just losing track of time when the fish are biting. The Coast Guard has protocols. They started with a standard search pattern focusing on the area where Captain Brennan said he'd be fishing. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Foster led the search operation. She'd done this dozens of times, and usually it ended with a sheepish boater being towed back to shore with a busted engine and an embarrassing story. But something about this one felt different from the start. The weather was perfect, she'd later recall. No storms, no unusual currents, and Captain Brennan was experienced. He wouldn't just disappear. The Coast Guard searched through the night. Helicopters with thermal imaging, patrol boats with searchlights, the works. They found nothing. Not a debris field, not a distress signal, not even a life jacket. It was like the Morning Star had simply vanished into thin air. By morning, the search had expanded. News crews had caught wind of the story. "Family of 4 missing off Cape Fear coast," read the headlines. Sofia's Facebook post got shared thousands of times. Miguel's brother flew in from Texas. The boys' school held a prayer vigil. But here's what made it even more horrific. The Rodriguez family wasn't the first. Coast Guard records showed something that nobody had connected until now. Over the past 3 years, 38 vessels had gone missing in the waters off Cape Fear. 38 boats, nearly 200 people, gone. Some were chalked up to storms, others to mechanical failures or operator error. A few were thought to be insurance fraud, but when you laid them all out on a map, a pattern emerged. Every single disappearance happened within a 20-square-mile area. The same hunting ground. Detective James Harlow with the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation got the call on September 9th. Maritime disappearances weren't usually his thing. He worked homicides in Raleigh, but the Coast Guard was overwhelmed and the FBI hadn't taken over yet. Someone needed to coordinate between agencies and start treating this like what it was beginning to look like: a crime scene. Harlow was a methodical investigator. 30 years on the job, he'd seen everything, or so he thought. He started pulling files on every disappearance in that area since 2011. What he found kept him up at night. The Sea Breeze, a 40-foot yacht, vanished in March 2012 with 6 people aboard. The Lucky Strike, a charter boat, disappeared in July 2013 with 9 fishermen. The Dolphin Dreams, a family boat, gone in October 2013 with a couple and their 3 kids. The list went on and on. Most people don't realize how often boats go missing, Harlow explained to his captain. But this is statistically impossible. We're talking about one area, 3 years, nearly 40 boats. Something's out there. The media started calling it the Cape Fear Triangle, a reference to the Bermuda Triangle. Conspiracy theories exploded online. Underwater whirlpools, secret military testing, even alien abduction. But Harlow wasn't interested in theories and he wanted evidence. The Coast Guard intensified their search for the Rodriguez family. Days turned into a week. Hope faded with each passing hour. Sofia's mother appeared on the news, tears streaming down her face, begging anyone with information to come forward. Then, on September 15th, everything changed. A lobster boat working about 8 miles offshore pulled up their traps and found something tangled in the lines. A life jacket. It was damaged, torn in a way that didn't look accidental. The name written in marker on the back read, Marcus Rodriguez. The Coast Guard immediately focused their search on that area. Within hours, they found more debris, pieces of fiberglass, a seat cushion, part of a fishing rod. All of it showed the same strange damage: ragged tears, puncture marks, something that looked almost like bite marks. That's when the marine biologist got involved. Dr. Andrea Sullivan from Duke University specialized in shark behavior. The Coast Guard sent her photos of the debris, and her response was immediate. "Get me out there, now." Dr. Sullivan examined the evidence on the Coast Guard cutter. She measured the bite radius, studied the tooth marks, analyzed the tearing patterns. Her face went pale. "This is a Greenland shark," she said quietly. "But it can't be. They don't come this far south, and they don't hunt like this." "How big are we talking?" Lieutenant Commander Foster asked. Dr. Sullivan pulled out her tablet and did some quick calculations based on the bite marks. "Based on these measurements, we're looking at something between 60 and 70 feet long. Maybe bigger. That's roughly triple the size of a typical Greenland shark." The room went silent. "And the attack pattern," Dr. Sullivan continued, her voice shaking slightly. "This isn't opportunistic feeding. Look at how the boat was taken apart. These bites are strategic. It's like the shark was methodically disabling the vessel." Harlow leaned forward. "You're saying this thing is hunting boats? Deliberately? I'm saying this doesn't match any predatory behavior I've ever seen documented. Sharks don't hunt boats. They don't have the cognitive ability to..." She stopped herself. "But the evidence is right here. Something learned to do this." The next question was obvious. If this shark had been hunting for 3 years, where was it now? The Cape Fear coast was in a state of panic. Once word leaked about the shark theory, and it always leaks, tourism dropped overnight. Marinas closed. Charter companies went out of business. The governor issued a warning against recreational boating in the area. But Detective Harlow had a different problem. Even if they found this shark, what then? You can't arrest an animal. There was no legal framework for this situation. The deaths weren't murders in the traditional sense, but they weren't accidents either. "We need to treat this like a serial predator case," Harlow told the task force that had assembled. Representatives from NOAA, the Coast Guard, FBI, and North Carolina Wildlife Commission all sat around the conference table. "We need to understand its pattern, predict where it will strike next, and neutralize the threat." The FBI brought in their behavioral analysis unit. Usually they profiled human killers, but the logic was the same: understand the predator to catch the predator. Dr. Sullivan worked with oceanographers to map currents and temperature changes. Greenland sharks preferred cold water, but if this one had adapted somehow, they needed to know why it stayed in this area. What was keeping it here? The answer came from an unexpected source. A commercial fisherman named Dale Hutchins walked into the Coast Guard station on September 22nd with a wild story. He'd been fishing these waters for 40 years, and about 4 years ago, he'd had an encounter he'd never reported because he thought people would think he was crazy. "I was hauling in my nets," Hutchins explained, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he spoke, "and something hit my boat. Not like we ran aground, something hit us from below, nearly capsized us. When I looked over the side, I saw it. This massive shark, but wrong, you know? Too big, wrong color, and its eye..." He paused. Its eye looked right at me. Not the way a shark looks at food. The way a person looks at you when they're deciding whether you're worth their time. Hutchins said he'd reported engine trouble and limped back to shore. He switched to fishing further south after that. Never came back to Cape Fear. "Why didn't you report this?" Harlow asked. "Would you have believed me? I barely believed it myself." But Hutchins wasn't done. He pulled out his phone and showed them something he'd filmed on his boat's deck camera. The footage was grainy, shot at dusk 4 years ago, but there it was, a massive dorsal fin cutting through the water, easily 6 feet tall, circling his boat. At one point, the shark bumped the hull, and you could see its massive body roll. The sheer size of it was breathtaking. "I've seen great whites," Hutchins said. "This wasn't that. This was something else." Dr. Sullivan studied the footage frame by frame. "This is before any of the disappearances started," she noted. "This might be when it first arrived in these waters." The task force developed a theory. Greenland sharks were deep-water creatures, scavengers mostly, living in the Arctic. But what if one had wandered south following food? What if it had encountered boats and learned that they contained easy prey? Sharks were more intelligent than people gave them credit for. If this one had made the connection between boats and food, it might have adapted its behavior. "It's not hunting randomly," Dr. Sullivan explained. "Look at the pattern of disappearances. They cluster around weekends and holidays, when more recreational boats are out. It's learned when the hunting is best." The task force deployed underwater monitoring equipment throughout the area. Sonar buoys, temperature sensors, acoustic tags on other sharks to see if they avoided certain areas. They were essentially setting up a surveillance net in the ocean. Meanwhile, families of the missing were demanding answers. The Rodriguez family's story had made national news, but they represented just one of dozens of families in limbo. No bodies meant no closure, no funerals, no death certificates, just waiting and wondering. Miguel's brother, Carlos Rodriguez, became the unofficial spokesperson for the families. He organized press conferences, pushed for more resources, demanded accountability. "Our government can track a terrorist across the world," he said in one emotional speech, "but they can't find what killed my brother right here in our own waters." The pressure was mounting, and then on October 3rd, the shark struck again. The Sea Spray was a 45-foot commercial fishing vessel with a crew of 7. They'd heard the warnings but insisted their bigger boat and experienced crew could handle any danger. They were working the edge of the restricted zone when it happened. This time, though, there was a survivor. Eddie Marsh, the first mate, managed to activate the emergency beacon before the boat went down. The Coast Guard reached him 40 minutes later, clinging to debris and nearly hypothermic. He was rushed to the hospital, and Detective Harlow was at his bedside within the hour. Eddie's story was terrifying in its detail. He said the shark appeared without warning, coming up from the deep. It circled them once, twice, 3 times. Then it attacked. "It didn't just bite the boat," Eddie said, his voice hoarse. "It rammed us, over and over, like it was trying to tip us over. When we started taking on water and people went in, that's when..." He couldn't finish. "Did you see it clearly?" Harlow asked gently. Eddie nodded. "It was massive. Had to be 60, 70 feet, dark gray, almost black, and its eye, God, its eye looked right at me before I went under. I grabbed onto some wreckage and I guess it didn't see me. But I heard the others. I heard them screaming. Eddie's testimony changed everything. This wasn't just a theory anymore, it was confirmed. And now they had a timeline. The shark had killed again less than 12 hours ago, which meant it was still in the area. The Coast Guard and NOAA scrambled every available vessel. If they could track it while it was still near the kill site, maybe they could finally get a visual, tag it, track it properly. Dr. Sullivan suggested using seal sounds to attract it. Greenland sharks fed on seals in the Arctic, but there was a debate. What if they lured it closer to shore? What if it attacked the boats they were using for the search? "We don't have a choice," Lieutenant Commander Foster said. "Every day that thing is out there, more people die." The operation launched at dawn on October 5th. 4 boats in a grid pattern, each one broadcasting SEAL distress calls underwater, helicopters overhead with thermal imaging. Every sensor they had was pointed at the water, watching and waiting. For 6 hours, nothing. Then, at 2 p.m., one of the sonar operators picked up something. A massive shape moving at depth, about 400 feet down. It was rising. "All vessels, we have contact," Foster radioed. "It's coming up." The water erupted about 200 yards from the nearest Coast Guard vessel. The shark breached, actually came completely out of the water, and the size of it defied belief. It was longer than a school bus, its body thick and muscular, its massive jaws parted slightly as it crashed back into the ocean. The helicopter caught it all on camera. The footage would later be broadcast worldwide, but in that moment, the crew could only stare in shock. "Get the tag gun!" someone shouted. The shark circled, and this time they could see it clearly beneath the surface. Dr. Sullivan was right. It was a Greenland shark, but mutated somehow, far larger than any specimen ever recorded. Its movements were deliberate, calculated. It knew the boats were there, and it seemed to be sizing them up. One of the vessels got close enough to deploy a tracking tag using a modified harpoon. The dart hit the shark just behind its dorsal fin, and for a moment everyone held their breath, thinking it might attack. Instead, the shark dove. The tracking signal came through loud and clear. They had it. "Don't lose that signal," Foster ordered. "I want every boat on that shark until we figure out how to stop it." Over the next 72 hours, they tracked the shark's movements. It stayed within its hunting ground, moving in a pattern that suggested it was searching for prey. And the tracking data revealed something chilling. It had been circling the area where Eddie Marsh's boat went down, returning to the scene like a predator checking a trap. The question nobody wanted to ask, but everyone was thinking, how do you stop something like this? You couldn't just kill a shark this size without evidence of what it had done. And the evidence was at the bottom of the ocean or in the shark's stomach. The legal and ethical debates raged while the shark continued hunting. Detective Harlow pushed for a different approach. "We need to capture it," he said. "We need to prove what it's done. Otherwise, this is all just theory and some families will never get closure." NOAA brought in their largest marine capture team. The plan was insane. Use heavy nets and tranquilizers to subdue the shark, then bring it to a specialized facility where they could perform a necropsy. It had never been attempted on a shark this size, and the risks were enormous, but they had to try. On October 12th, the operation began. They'd tracked the shark to deeper water, about 12 miles offshore. Perfect place to attempt a capture away from civilians. The team used bait, seal carcasses, and fish to keep the shark in place while they set up massive reinforced nets. The shark took the bait. As it fed, the nets began to close around it. That's when everything went wrong. The shark realized it was trapped and went berserk. It tore through the first net like it was tissue paper. The second net held, barely, but the shark was so powerful that it started pulling the boats toward it. "Deploy tranquilizers!" the team leader shouted. Dart after dart hit the shark. Each one contained enough sedative to drop an elephant. They needed 12 darts before the shark's movement started to slow. Even then, it took another hour before it was subdued enough to secure properly. The operation to bring the shark in took 8 hours and required 3 heavy lift boats. When they finally got it to the NOAA research facility in Charleston, a crowd of media and onlookers had gathered. The sight of the shark being lifted out of the water by crane was surreal. It looked more like a submarine than a living creature. Dr. Sullivan assembled a team of marine biologists, veterinarians, and forensic experts. The necropsy began on October 14th with Detective Harlow present as a law enforcement witness. What they found inside the shark's stomach would haunt everyone in that room for the rest of their lives. Boat fragments, dozens of them, pieces of fiberglass, metal railings, part of an engine mount. Each piece was cataloged, photographed, and matched against missing vessels' reports. They found fragments matching the Morning Star, the Sea Breeze, the Lucky Strike. At least 19 different boats could be identified. Then they found personal effects, a waterproof watch still showing the correct time, a wedding ring, a child's toy boat, a cell phone in a waterproof case that somehow still powered on. It belonged to one of the victims from 2013. The forensic team found something else, fishing line embedded in the shark's jaw from years ago and evidence of an old boat propeller injury. Dr. Sullivan theorized that the shark had been injured by humans, possibly in the Arctic, and that injury might have caused a behavioral change. It had learned to associate boats with pain or threat, and its response was to eliminate them. This shark wasn't just feeding, Dr. Sullivan explained to Harlow. It was defending its territory. It had claimed these waters, and anything that entered them was a threat to be eliminated. But the most crucial piece of evidence was found in a deeper chamber of the shark's stomach, a waterproof action camera still recording. The camera belonged to the Rodriguez family, specifically to Daniel Rodriguez, who'd been filming their fishing trip. The forensic team extracted the memory card and reviewed the footage. It showed the Rodriguez family's last moments, the shark circling beneath their boat, the sudden impact, the boat taking on water, Miguel trying to radio for help, the boys putting on life jackets, and then the final terrible moments as the shark returned. The footage was heartbreaking but also crucial. It showed premeditated hunting behavior. The shark had stalked them before attacking. It had waited for the right moment to strike. This wasn't animal instinct, this was learned behavior, strategy. Now here's where that cell phone footage from the fisherman Ryan Donovan came into play. Remember at the beginning I mentioned footage captured from shore? Donovan lived in a cottage overlooking the water, and on the morning of September 29th, he'd seen something unusual and started filming with his phone. The footage showed the shark breaching close to shore, closer than it had ever been documented before. This was before the capture operation, and investigators had initially dismissed it as irrelevant. But when they looked at it again in light of the necropsy findings, they realized something chilling. The shark was visible from shore because it was hunting in shallower water. It had started coming closer to land, expanding its territory. If they hadn't captured it when they did, it would have eventually started attacking boats in harbors and swimming areas, places where hundreds of people gathered. Donovan's footage also showed markings on the shark's body that matched the tracking data. This was definitively the same creature. His video, initially posted to social media and viewed as just another sea monster hoax, became official evidence. The timestamp on the video helped investigators understand the shark's movement patterns in the days before capture. The case was airtight, the evidence overwhelming. But here's the thing, how do you prosecute an animal? You can't. But what you can do is ensure the families get answers and closure. The findings were released to the public on October 28th. The shark was confirmed to be responsible for 39 boat disappearances and the deaths of 214 people over a 4-year period. It remains the deadliest shark attack event in recorded history. The shark itself didn't survive the sedation and capture process. Its body simply couldn't handle the stress. But the necropsy provided all the evidence needed to close dozens of missing persons cases. Families finally got death certificates. They could hold funerals. They could begin to heal. Carlos Rodriguez became an advocate for maritime safety reform. He pushed for better tracking systems for boats, mandatory check-in protocols, and more Coast Guard funding for search and rescue operations. Several bills were passed in North Carolina and other coastal states, often referred to as Miguel's Law in honor of his brother. While this wasn't a criminal case in the traditional sense, the findings and evidence were documented as part of maritime disaster records. The incident led to new protocols for identifying and tracking dangerous marine animals and created legal precedents for how authorities can respond to wildlife threats to human life. The surviving families hold an annual memorial service on the Cape Fear coast every September 7th. They place wreaths in the water and honor the memories of those lost. The Rodriguez family's story, and the stories of all the victims, serve as a reminder that the ocean, beautiful as it is, demands our respect. Sofia Rodriguez's last Facebook post, the one with her family smiling on the dock, remains active. Friends and strangers still leave comments, sharing memories and condolences. One comment, left by someone who never knew the family, reads, "I hope you're all fishing together in peaceful waters now." Miguel Rodriguez was 42. Daniel was 16. Marcus was 14. Sofia was 40. Captain Tim Brennan was 57. And they were just 5 of the 214 people whose lives were cut short by the creature that hunted the waters of Cape Fear. The shark's body was preserved and is currently housed at the Smithsonian Institution, where it serves as both a scientific specimen and a memorial to those it killed. Researchers continue to study it, hoping to understand how and why it developed such unusual behavior. Ryan Donovan's footage has been viewed millions of times. It serves as a visual reminder of what lurked just offshore and how close the danger came to shore. That single piece of citizen journalism helped investigators piece together the final chapter of this terrifying story. May the victims rest in peace, and may their families find comfort in knowing the truth.